Joining me in the studio, Kavis Reed, current general manager for the Alouettes, also former assistant coach for the Roughriders. Kavis, great to have you here.
Thank you for having me on.
Also, Collin Pullar, the president of the Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, in studio with us as well. Thanks for being here. Nice to meet you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
We're going to have kind of a wide-ranging conversation on safety and leadership and security and all those things. But Kavis, I'm sorry, before we get there, you're going to take care of our guy, right? You're going to take care of our guy, aren't you?
I'm expecting him to take care of us more than anything else. And also, I have to add that Darian sends his very best regards to Rider Nation, and he's looking forward to coming back to Saskatchewan in late October and reuniting with the fans here.
So, okay, now that we've got that out of the way and aside here, I guess I don't necessarily think of you when we're talking about, safety, security, and construction, and all those types of things. I don't necessarily kind of make that connection with you because I know you in a completely different role. What really kind of piqued your interest in safety and got you involved in promoting it?
Yeah, after my injury in 1999, it was really something where we don't think about workplace hazard in football. But football is a very violent sport, but it also has rules applied to it. And when you step outside the boundaries of those rules, sometimes people get hurt. And I was one of the fortunate ones that my injury was career-ending, but it wasn't as catastrophic as it could have been. And that piqued my interest in that whole safety aspect of it, that we can play the game and we should play it safely as well.
Collin, for yourself, I mean, obviously you're connected with Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association. You're the president, but I guess underlying that and behind that, what kind of brought you here to really kind of push this and talk about it?
Yeah, before I came into the association itself, my background was much more in government and business, and the whole safety thing was a bit of a black box to me. But when I first saw the organization, first understood what it was about, it kind of dovetailed into some other things I thought about business efficiency. That, as Kavis and I were talking earlier, businesses who are really good at their marketing and their branding and their sales side, this seemed to fit. If you could protect your greatest asset, which companies claim are their people, you're more likely to be successful over the long run than if you don't protect those things.
Are things changing in the province? I think back, and not too many years ago, I'm talking a handful of years ago, and I would drive around the city and I would see guys working on roofs, no harnesses. I rarely see that anymore. Is it getting better?
There are some positive trends. We're not there yet by any means, but there are certainly some positive trends. The business community is taking more recognition of this. The general consumer is thinking about this a lot more, and when they realize some of the liabilities that can be attached to them when they hire somebody to do some work on their roof or build them a deck or do some other renovations on their home. And, they're starting to recognize, this is risky for us and for that person who's working on it. And it's not a necessary risk. There's times that there's a risk that's necessary to take, but it's a completely unnecessary risk. And there are easy ways to be able to avoid and mitigate those things.
Why do those risks still get taken, do you think? The unnecessary ones?
Oftentimes, we want to take something that's the shortest path to get something done. We don't think that there's potentially repercussions to doing this, and so we're more likely to take a risk because of that, or even understand that the repercussions could be lifelong, life-ending in some cases, and so we seem to kind of minimize the probability in our minds and just accept it. And that's typically where you start to see these problems emerge. And then what we've been trying to do, and what others are doing, is general public said, we don't know if we accept that so much as a society anymore. Is that the way that we want to be able to run? We're seeing the cost, not just the financial cost, but the human cost when people have career-ending injuries. People who have set up in really great careers to only have it cut short. It's just not an acceptable thing anymore.
Yeah, Kavis, let's kind of take this back to, I guess, some of your experiences as well. Collin's talking about there are risks and they're inherent in everything we do. Football is a violent game. It is a physical game, but things are even changing there in terms of what's considered an acceptable risk.
Yes.
Even just in the recent years, it's progressing, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot more conversation about playing it safely, about taking the head out of the game, and the techniques that are being taught the changes in equipment. There's so much more information being presented that we did not have half of those information when we were playing. And now the game is a lot cleaner. The rules that are being employed are a lot more towards safety, and there's no compromise in safety when discussions are being had about rules.
So how much of this has to come from you, come from the league? How much comes from the coaches? How much comes from the individuals itself? Where does the really ultimate responsibility lie?
Yeah, from a leadership perspective, it's all about creating that culture where not doing it the right way, not doing it the safe way is not acceptable. And when you create that culture, it trickles down. And you make certain that you're enforcing that every single day. And when you see someone violate something that is going to put them in harm's way, you immediately you admonish them and you make certain that they understand that this is not for the good of you or the good of the team.
So, Collin, translate then that to the work site. Not that, football is not, a work site. It's a business and they're professional players and everything. But, Kavis had mentioned leadership. How key is that?
Absolutely. And I can echo a lot of things that Kavis just mentioned right now. We understand more. Young people coming out of trade schools are learning more about the prevention of injury and the importance of maintaining good health when they're going to work. But leaders are also recognizing, because it's cost them directly, both from a financial perspective, but also reputational. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to go to work for a place where that company is known to have to not take seriously the health and safety of their workers. We've got companies now that they're turning it into their strategic advantage to have a great safe program and be recognized that, hey, that's a good place to go and work.
Talk a little bit about that, because I don't know that, I think maybe businesses and business leaders are starting to see it as a potential strategic advantage, but not everyone's there yet.
No, not everyone's there yet. But the fact is that's becoming more part of the conversation where they're looking at their culture broadly and saying, there's things in here that we can actually go and sell to attract the better people. When you're in an industry that really relies on highly skilled workers, companies that can distinguish themselves from others, being the place that would be preferred to work, being able to market themselves as a company that takes things safely, that a consumer, when they're buying a product, knows that this person's going to take their time to do it right, and they may be more methodical, and the likelihood of being because of the fact that they are more methodical in their safety management, they're more likely to be the same way with other aspects of their business. Mm-hmm. They'll measure twice, they'll cut once. Mm-hmm. And, to quote somebody just recently is, I cut this board 3 times and it's still too short, right? So, and you don't want that. So
someone told you about my deck building experience.
Yeah, I heard about that. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. But the reality is that those habits translate to other parts of the business. So you're more attuned to how your financial management practices are. You're more attuned to, are we doing things legally and properly? Do we have the right permits in place? Can we give our customer confidence that when we come to go on site, they're not going to have a problem. They're not going to have major delays because somebody fell off the roof and had a major injury or death. Mm-hmm. They ended up having to shut the site down for 3 weeks, and they can't get their home back because there's something that has to be investigated and taken care of.
How much of that is an education process broadly? Because you're talking about the leadership, but you're also talking about the end consumer, if they're getting renovation work done or something else. And the individual worker, as they're coming out, say, of some of these trade schools, there is more emphasis now on safety and more emphasis on that training. How broad is that brush you need to paint with?
Well, it goes pretty broad. Right to the people who are financing the projects. Every builder has got to work with a finance, whether it's their bank extending credit or someone who's issuing a bond. It goes to those people because they're also taking a risk when they're making an investment in a company, and they want to know that the company's methodical in how they conduct business. When we talk about consumers want confidence that their product's going to be on time, on budget, no hiccups. Mm-hmm. They don't want to have blood to mop up after somebody's left. Yeah. And unfortunately that has happened. And the general public saying, this is just not. I don't want to be associated with a company that is known for not at least making a real decent effort to be safe and methodical, it can damage reputation.
And they can see the benefit. I mean, obviously, if this is something that the company's going to take seriously, they take their business seriously, which means they probably going to end up with a superior product, superior work, and so on down the line.
Absolutely. It's actually, we see it as an attribute towards quality. And the same thing goes when we talk about long-term financial returns for a company that at the front end, it may take a lot more work, but they're setting a foundation where they can reduce the volatility that can come into a business because of a work stoppage issue. Again, somebody getting hurt, an accident, even somebody doesn't get hurt, but equipment is damaged. If they can take the volatility out of their business, they can predict their returns much more accurately.
Guys, can you stay with me just for a little bit here? I have so much more I want to talk about.
For sure.
In the studio with me, Kavis Reed. He, of course, is the GM for the Alouettes, also former assistant coach for the Riders, and Collin Pullar, president of the Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association. We'll continue to pick up our conversation in just a moment. Thanks for coming with us here. And in the studio with me is Collin Pullar, the president of Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association. Also, Kavis Reed, the GM for the Alouettes, of course, former assistant coach for the Roughriders, always a part of Rider Nation no matter what happens. If you drive through the province, you're a part of Rider Nation, even though you may be working other places.
It's just like a blood transfusion. Once it's in you, it's in you.
We were just talking, and Collin had talked about, leadership in terms of safety. And we're talking workplace safety, and it encompasses so many different types of work. It's not necessarily the hammer and nail and thing, a very important part of it, but and I think Collin had referenced this. It's a culture that you're trying to build. It really is a team thing that you need to do. And how do you compare that? Because you're outspoken on this, and you're talking about this, and you come from that team and organizational background. How do those pieces fit? How do you make it work?
I think the most important part of the team aspect of it is everyone understanding their role. On a site, everyone has a role to make certain everyone gets home safely, to make certain the job is done correctly. And when roles are clearly defined on all teams, regardless of the team construct, when the roles are clearly defined and people work within those roles, things generally work out well. The compromise happens when people step outside their role or they neglect to be the best at their role. And that is a true emphasis for us in terms of trying to build a championship team on the playing field, is to make certain the roles are clearly defined, people are equipped to do their very best at that role. And when people step outside of their role, we quickly let them know that that's not their role.
And that's what we would call a broken play, I think. No, but seriously, it really does translate very directly to what we're talking about, where clearly identified roles, everyone knows what they're supposed to do, what the expectations are, and you have people around them that will help guide them to do what they should be doing if they miss a step or they turn the right way. It's a direct link and connection.
Yeah, and even if the team is at home, if you think about your family construct, the parents are going to be the orchestra directors for the kids, and they understand if they step outside a certain parameter, we have to push them back in. On a job site, you usually have supervisors that make certain they're making certain things are done the right way, safely and cost effectively, and making certain that there are no shortcuts being taken so that you compromise someone's health or ability to get home safely. Much like a head coach, much like a general manager, much like assistant coaches, the overall infrastructure is pretty much the same and translates.
Collin, it is eerie almost how direct it does translate to any business environment or workplace environment, but even more structured in a sense, because we all get to watch the games. We all get to see the end result. We get to see when there's a mistake made. We don't necessarily get to see that mistake when there's a problem or an issue inside a business or on a site.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the challenges that we see in professional sport is that you're in a glass bowl and everybody's looking through the glass. Mm-hmm. So everyone could recognize when things fall apart. Everyone's making their own notes. They're filling out their own incident reports, all those kind of things. But in a business on a work site, generally that's not the norm.
Yeah.
And, but as leaders in organizations, our role, and we often talk about this with people who are in safety leaders or that safety responsibility, is that they're always trying to go out there making sure that they're correcting things. Hey, listen, you don't have that on right. You didn't put your hat on. You didn't put your shoes on properly. We've got a number of people who are watching a game, and they're trying to correct things and they're trying to make calls. But as leaders, our role is not necessarily correction. It's about connecting. And if we take more time to connect with people, the corrections come because it opens up the opportunity for people to listen and understand that you actually care that they get home safely. So your care, how it comes out is, you need to wear your equipment. You need to use a safer method. If you get good at using a safer method, you will become more effective and more efficient. And we can guarantee that at times that our projects are getting done on time and on budget. The other thing we talk about as far as leadership at the individual level are two things. One is you got to look after yourself. You got to make sure that you're properly prepared to do the job. You've been properly trained, and you've sought out knowledge, that you're actually doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. And the second thing you're supposed to be looking after is the person beside you. Look after yourself and look out for the other people around you, because you can't see behind you, and you're relying on your teammates on a work site, in an office, to see the things that you can't see.
We've only got a couple minutes left here, but for someone, say, who is out actively working, whether in a supervisory role, whether in another role, something like that, and they're going, well, it's not too bad. We're kind of doing okay. What are some basic steps and things that businesses and organizations should be looking at to get better?
A couple things. One is making a commitment, right from the leadership. I'm saying that, listen, 0 is a number that we're committed to. So whatever we're doing, that's okay. What can we do better? And what's the benefit of us doing better with it? It may be an opportunity to engage employees in a way you haven't been able to engage them before. You might find new opportunities, not necessarily safety related, but things that are around safety that, because you've had this conversation, it opens up lines for other things.
To broaden the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
How basic is communication? Whether it's on the field, Kavis, or whether it's in a work site, how basic is communication? It's kind of at the root of everything, isn't it?
I think historically speaking, we can always say that problems in any organization, any social group, or any group in general, it's going to stem from one or two things: leadership and communication. Any relationship where there's an issue usually stems back to the leadership structure or communication. And I think there has to be, as Collin alluded to, in a business, an audit of what's happening, what's the environment. And once you have that critical audit, now you are able to effectively create a plan of attack, a communication strategy to make certain the message disseminates from the leadership to the people that are executing that message. And the message has to be clear. Clarity of message. That means interaction. That means the unspoken message is also very powerful as well, not just an email or a text message.
And Collin, you can't move forward unless you know where you are.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can't find yourself on a map, then you don't know where you're going to go next.
Guys, it's been so great having you and chatting with you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Great, thank you
very much.
It's been just super chatting with Collin Pullar, the president of the Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association. Also, Kavis Reed, yes, the general manager for the Alouettes, but a former assistant coach for the Riders, so we still count him as one of ours. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time around.